Hi guys, welcome to AQL webinars. Hopefully everybody can hear me. And thanks for coming to this webinar. My name is Samir Muhammad, and I'm going to be the speaker today. I'm the SharePoint principal at AQL Technologies, and this is a little bit about me. 20 years of IT experience implementing SharePoint since 2003, Microsoft certified intelligence of SharePoint, and please send me a LinkedIn invite. Please send me a Twitter invite. I would love to connect with you over LinkedIn and Twitter. That's my blog, and I'll be posting more blogs on my website in this month, since I see that I have a lot more time in this month rather than the previous one. So I'm going to be posting a lot more blogs in regards with Microsoft Office 365 communication sites, SharePoint hubs, and all of that. So please do send me a LinkedIn invite and a Twitter invite. Here's a little bit of information about AQL Technologies. AQL has been around for the past 12 years. We were established in 2006. We are a Microsoft Gold partner for SharePoint, and we do IT consulting, software development, and also we provide IT staffing, which is focused on the Microsoft stack, focused on SharePoint and Office 365. And catch us at most of the Microsoft conferences, maybe SharePoint Fest, Washington, D.C., SharePoint Fest, Chicago, SharePoint Fest, Seattle, or the Microsoft conference in Las Vegas, which is the May 21st. We're going to be there. So catch us at any Microsoft conferences, and please stop by at our booth. We help small to Fortune 500 firms take advantage of the latest technologies, and we are and our SharePoint practice is 30+ expert developers, analysts, and scientists. As I said, 12 years of IT experience, hundreds of satisfied clients and growing, and hundreds of successful projects delivered. And finally, as I said in the beginning, we are a Microsoft Gold partner on SharePoint and Office 365, and we are also a Microsoft SharePoint Development Planning Services partner. Also, before I get started, I want to tell you about this free pass that we're giving out for SharePoint Fest Washington, D.C., which is from March 26th to March 30th. And the lucky draw is on March the 16th. You will receive an email. So this is actually a gold pass worth $1,425. And we have one free pass that we want to give out. And after this conference or after this webinar, you might have already received an email to register for a lucky draw. So when you register on March the 19th, you're going to go ahead and pick up that lucky draw and announce the name. And this free pass is worth $1,425. So please be signing up for this lucky draw. So let's get started today with deep dive into Office 365 groups. So what exactly are groups? We talked a little bit, 3 weeks back, and this is a series that I try doing every 3 to 4 weeks. So last time I tried covering a lot of topics, which was Office 365 communication sites, team sites, classic versus modern UI, and a lot of other things. But this webinar is just focused only on Office 365 groups. I'm going to cover this webinar from end user perspective, from developer perspective, from IT perspective, and kind of like give you a very broad picture of what's happening behind the scenes. So here's the agenda. These are the things that we're going to be covering today. What are Office 365 groups? Demo of groups and teams. We're going to do a quick demo of groups and how, what happens behind the scenes when you end up creating a group. Talk about Office 365 limits. Talk about external access. What is external access? What does external access mean when it comes down to groups? Naming policies. Disable group creation. How can I possibly have a more controlled way of creating groups versus the default way of Office 365 where everybody can just end up creating a groups and there could be a humongous amount of groups. Classification. Is there any way I can do any kind of classification on these groups? Expiration. Dynamic membership. Managing groups. Best practices and governance. That's one of the big things. I mean, what are some of the best practices and governance around Office 365? If you just let it grow organically, there's just going to be a humongous amount of groups and all the resources created behind the scenes, and it just becomes almost impossible to manage them. and then best practices on external user access, best practices on disabling group creation access, and then finally, what kind of reporting do I have on groups, and then benefits, and then group management features. So let's get started. So what exactly are groups? So, groups is a service that works with Office 365 tools. And you can choose a set of people and easily set up a collection of Office 365 tools for them to share. It lets you incorporate collaboration, communication, scheduling, project management, all in no time. It provides new and improved experience for distribution lists or shared mailboxes. So any of you who have been using distribution list or shared mailboxes, you can actually upgrade. There's a way that you can upgrade over to Office 365 groups. Another view of what really Office 365 groups are. So Office 365 provides you with all these different, SKUs, maybe Outlook for emails, SharePoint, Yammer, Office apps, Teams. There could actually be a lot of these, and Office 365 pretty much provides you, a single team membership across all these apps and services. So as soon as you create a group, you can actually, and all are associated with all use the Office 365 or Microsoft Graph or security and compliance. It's actually spread across all these different SKUs. Another view of how it looks like, Office 365 groups are actually sitting in Azure AD. And these are spread across all these different SKUs, maybe Outlook, OneDrive, OneNote, Calendar, Skype, Delve, Yammer, Dynamics CRM, and several different services. Planner, I'm actually missing Planner over there. So Office 365 groups provide access to all these different SKUs behind the scenes. And also you can associate using connectors, you can associate them with your external apps, maybe Salesforce, maybe Wunderlist, maybe a lot of different external services. You can actually go ahead and associate these groups to those non-Microsoft services as well. So let's go ahead and put a demo together. And I'm going to go ahead and do a quick demo. Some of this might be in line with what I have done last time in my last session, but this time I'm going to focus more on some of those things that I haven't covered the last time. But I need to start with creating a demo case first. So we're going to go ahead and create a demo, and this is again what happens at AQL Technologies. One of the typical cases when we use groups is at AQL Technologies for any kind of annual budget planning, any kind of new proposal, any kind of new account that potentially we think that it's going to require its own resources. We end up creating a group. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and create a group, a proposal team group for actually putting together, something like an annual budget planning. So this is going to be an annual budget planning group. And so I can actually create a group from several different places. I'm going to get started creating this group from Outlook. This is one of the best and easiest way of actually creating an Office 365 group right from Outlook itself. So over here, I can actually see a list of all my groups. Click on plus right here, and this opens up a window where I can go ahead and create a group. Right when I'm actually creating this group, an email address is being created right here. And I can see that this actually has got an email as well. Provide a description as to what this group is about. Provide privacy statement as to if this is going to be a private group or a public group. The default is public. I'm going to go ahead and choose a private group. No matter what kind of group, everybody can discover this group. None of these groups are really hidden. Even if they're private, even if they're public, people can just go and discover that. But public groups do not require any kind of approval mechanism, but private group requires the owner to go ahead and approve them. And finally, I have this classification over here, and I'm going to talk about this classification a lot more behind the scenes. This actually is a good governance practice, and enabling classification tells me what kind of data do I have over here. So I'm going to say it's a secure, high security classification group that I'm creating over here. takes a second in creating it. So pretty much what's happening behind the scenes is that add members. I can go ahead and add members in here. Let's go ahead and add Donna Carden. Let's go ahead and add. So in lines with my demo that I have here, I'm going to add a whole bunch of users here, which is going to be business development exec Sam, marketing exec Riz, sales exec Donna Carden. So if you really look at it, these are people from different departments. These over here are people from sales and marketing department. These over here might be from the IT department over here. So I'm going to add a whole different bunch of people. Sam, right there. Riz. Donna is already there. I'm already there. Let's add Zach Merchant in there. And then the SharePoint principal Imran. So I got a whole bunch of different people whom I'm actually adding to the group, and the group is being created behind the scenes. Now, what's happening behind the groups? Let's go ahead and take a look at this picture over here. This infographic, I had actually done a basic version last time, but I had some plans to go ahead and enhance this. So you're gonna look at it. When you take a look at it, you're gonna see that. So these are the different services. These are the different Office 365 SKUs from which I can go ahead and create Office 365 groups. Maybe Yammer, or maybe Mail, Planner, SharePoint, or Stream, or maybe Teams. So these are the different SKUs. These are the different Office 365 SKUs from which you can end up creating groups. I create my groups right from Outlook Mail itself, which is this over here. So I'm going to see that these are the different services which are created behind the scenes. Anything which is X mark, it's obvious that service is not created behind the scenes. So Teams are not created, but Outlook email inbox is generated. Power BI workspace is generated. Outlook shared calendar is generated. Planner plan is generated. SharePoint site is generated. OneBox notepad is generated, and Stream video portal is generated. So behind the scenes, all these services are automatically created by Office 365. So I just ended up creating groups by mail, but all these different services behind the scenes are created. Now, so this actually is very powerful. This gives me a lot of power. So at times, it actually takes a little bit of time over here to go ahead and generate that. At times, I've seen that even though this group has been created here, and I can see this over here, even though this group has been created, but at times I have seen that it takes some time before these other services are created, before these other SKUs are created. So if I go in conversations, so these are my Outlook conversations. I click on files. Let's see what I see over here. So you will see all your files one place. So I can actually go ahead and, so this is a very basic interface. I can actually see, you can see that this is a very basic interface where users can go ahead and upload, where users can go ahead and upload all the information. And and the good part about it is that it's so very basic that users don't need to understand SharePoint. Users don't need to understand the complexities behind, uploading files to SharePoint document library or so. They could just go ahead and start uploading files right from here. And when they actually upload files right from here, these get added automatically to the SharePoint site, which is generated behind the scenes. And I'll go ahead and show that to you in a second. Click on calendar. This shows me the group calendar. This is only focused on, so I can go ahead and X out any other calendar, and then the only calendar that I see over here is just the calendar for my group. So which means that I have all these bunch of people, who actually have a shared calendar now. Click on the ellipse over here, you're going to see 3 other services: Notebook, Planner, and Sites. So what's happening over here behind the scenes? When you create an Office 365 group, Exchange Online, So there's Exchange Office 365 has got Exchange as well behind the scenes. So Exchange Online behind the scene, it generates a mailbox for it. This gives the user an email address, and I can actually see, click over here and see a list of all my members over here. So this also gives this group an email address to send and receive through Outlook and enable the members of the group to communicate openly using email as a conversation mechanism. These are the bunch of users that I've added over here. And when I click on owners over here, I see the owner, which is just me. I see the guest, click on guest, and I don't see any guests over here. The reason being that guests is another word for external users, which pretty much means that all those users who are not part of Office 365, but they might actually have a Gmail account or a Yahoo account or an Outlook account, which is non-Office 365 accounts. They can actually access these resources. They don't have to be Office 365 subscribed users, but they are just random users with free accounts, and they can just log in over here, and then they can access some of these resources over here. And now let me go ahead and show you Planner. So this is Planner. If you have not started using Planner, Planner is a pretty great tool for actually doing task management. And I've used this a lot, and I think I just like it. I can go ahead and create several different tasks, assign those several different tasks to several different users, which is awesome. This is Notebook. You can just go ahead and you can see that Notebook is already created as one of the books over here. I'm sorry, I mean that the annual budget is actually created as one of the books over here. If you are thinking why is there an AQL prefix to the group that I have created? When I created the group, there was no AQL prefix, and I'll answer that question within a second. Or actually down the line, I'm going to answer the question. We're going to talk more about naming conventions. So you can see that within no time, all these different resources are just created by Office 365, and users can go ahead and access it. And finally, this is the theme site. I can actually go ahead and access this theme site. And this is the modern theme site. Users can access this modern theme site, and anything that the users are actually uploading, all this data is actually being uploaded over to the theme site. And 1 second here. Sorry, lost my window there. So this is the modern theme site, and this modern theme site is created. I can actually see, you click on members over here, you can actually see all the different members right from here as well. Click on conversations, and you're going to see that it just opens up, your Outlook window. Just Outlook window load with the emails right there. So this theme site is pretty integrated. So this theme site is kind of like the repository behind all those files which are being uploaded from everything else. Click on documents, you're going to see that that there's a document library behind the scenes. And then the good part is that any files that you upload right from this interface. So I'm actually back in Outlook and looking at the groups over here. So if you upload any files from here, even though this is a very seamless interface, but when you upload any files from here, you're going to see that these files are basically uploaded behind the scenes into the theme sites right here. And so the good part is that it's just a extremely basic it's a real basic, extremely basic. So if I select this file and then upload that, this is a very simple interface. And then the beauty about it is that any users who are just getting started with Office 365 groups, they don't need to know anything about SharePoint or libraries or theme sites. They could just be working right within this interface itself. Excuse me. Take a second there to the port. We can actually come back to it later. So just going back, meanwhile, let's go back to this chart and let's dig into this chart. So any of these services that I create from any of the SKUs here, they end up creating these services. Anything which is X mark, other than that, everything else gets created. I can actually create channels within Teams as well. It just does not automatically create it, but I can actually log in, and then I can go ahead and create channels in Teams from the group that I've created. If I actually create something from Yammer, then Teams do not get created. Outlook, email, and box does not get created. Outlook shared calendar does not get created, but all these different services do definitely get created. The same applies with Teams. When I actually create an Office 365 group right from Teams, you're going to see that all of these different SKUs are created behind the scenes. Yammer feed is not created, but everything else gets created behind the scenes. So you can see how powerful this is. As soon as you create an Office 365 group, all these different services gets created, and they are very connected with each other. If you end up deleting a team site, then this deletes the Office 365 group as well. Yes. So if you delete Office 365 group right from here, then all those different resources, which are all these different Office 365 SKUs, which are created behind the scenes, all of them get deleted. So it's pretty interesting. I think I just ended up uploading a humongous file. I'm going to come back to that in a second. So, so when a group is, by the way, when groups are created in Teams, the privacy of the group is automatically set to private. In my case, I was able to set a group to private or public. I didn't have a choice, but when you do the same thing from Teams, you're going to see that they are created as private only. But you have the choice of creating public group, as we have seen right from Office 365 groups itself. Let's go over to the limits. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the Office 365 group limits. Owners per group. How many owners can I create? Can there be per group? 100. Owners a user, group a users can create 250. As of right now, there's a limit of 250. These changes have been happening pretty often. If these have changed in the recent month or couple months, this might not be updated. But as of right now, from what I know, 250 groups can be created by a user. Groups an admin can create, it's up to 500,000 users. 500,000 groups, sorry. Number of members, more than 1,000, so only 1,000 can access a group conversations concurrently. Users might notice delay when accessing the calendar and conversations in a very large group in Outlook. Number of groups a user can be a member of, 1,000. File storage, 1 terabyte, so that's humongous. So this is the file storage, the size of the files that can be stored within the associated Microsoft Teams site, plus 500 megabytes per subscribed user, plus any additional storage purchase. You can purchase an unlimited amount of additional storage. So I think that we have pretty well covered over there. That's a humongous amount of file storage for a group. Group mailbox size, 50 gigs. Guys, by the way, if you ask any questions, I know there were a few questions that were actually asked last time. I don't get to see all those questions, but I'll try answering as many questions as possible. One of the questions that was asked last time was that, can this group calendar be accessed by, because your users are so much used to accessing calendar from SharePoint, can this group calendar, so the group calendar that I have over here, can this group calendar be accessed from SharePoint? Yes, that's possible. And you can actually, so this is the group calendar here. So yes, that's possible. You can actually go to the associated team site over here. And then when you go to the home page, you can actually add the events to this page here. And you can add a calendar right here. Says Office 365 group calendar right there. So you can actually go ahead and add the group calendar right in your team site itself. Click on the settings here, which is going to show you. So do you see that this is the group calendar? So if I actually have, I'm going to say it might be 10 or 20. So close this, save it right here, and then publish that. So if I go back to the calendar and end up creating, so on the 15th, AQL is going to be at UIC for a student career event. So if I go ahead and add, oops, wrong there. Yeah. AQL at UIC. And we're gonna be there the whole day. So if I go ahead and dig here. Oops, I think that I actually created that for the wrong one. Sorry about that. Right, and now if I go back to my team site here, in which I've added the group calendar web part, then I should be able to see that right there. So I should be able to see it. So if you actually have an event created in your group calendar, and if your team is used to seeing the group calendar within SharePoint page, then this is how you can do it. You can't really customize it much. This is by far the only view that it provides. So can admins block? So I see another question here. Can admins block guests in a group and still allow guests to access SharePoint sites? Yes, admins can use Azure Active Directory. We're going to talk about Azure Active Directory in a second, but admins can definitely use Azure Active Directory, PowerShell to disable external access of users. And once you do that, then external access, then external users, they just cannot log into SharePoint. We're going to talk about external access in a second here. So right here, external access. So let's give non-Office 365 users access to external users. So this pretty much means that, hey, so I have this group that I just created. Now what I want to do is that I want to have external users access it. How can I do that? It's pretty basic. It's pretty easy. The way I do it is I just go over back to my group right here, and select my group. Get out of this calendar. Give it a second to load. And okay. So Microsoft has got this pretty easy way that you can actually add external users, and so it's just opening up. I was actually stuck on the calendar view. Click on annual budget, and let's go ahead and click on members right here. And when I click on the members part, I'm going to see two different types, or actually three different types of users which are part of this group. One is the owners, okay, which I'm the owner. And then when I click on all, I'm going to see a list of all the users who are part of this group. When I click on guests, and there are no guests. So these guests are nothing but external users. MC match 1-3. Actually, let me go ahead and add a different account, which is okay. Give me a second right there. I just want to log into this email, and then as we'll show you, I just want to make sure that I use the right account over here. Submit access. Sorry guys, give me a second here. Okay, so actually I'm going to go back and add this user itself. So when I do this, this is basically a guest user, which means that a non-Microsoft, non-Office 365 user can go ahead and add services. As soon as I click on send, pretty much what's going to happen here is that I'm going to have this user can access my account now. And let me go ahead and try accessing this user from my not so favorite browser, which is Internet Explorer. I'm not a big fan of that anymore. Oops. Okay. So pretty much what I'm doing right now is that I'm logging into my Gmail account. And so there should be a request on this Gmail account. And the request is sent from Office 365. User has to go ahead and approve and click on that certain email. When the user does that, here it is. I just got this email from Office 365 saying that this is AQL annual budget management at AQL, and this is a private group with so-and-so guest, and I need to go ahead and get started with accessing this group. These are the bunch of users. I can go ahead and click on access files, which logs me in. Oops. So we need permissions to access this, and I'm going to go back here and show you how this actually works out. I think that there's some certain permission issues here. I'm not going to go into that, but this is pretty much the email that I got. AQL annual budget approval. These are the list of users, and I just clicked on access file, and then it requires me to go ahead and right when I click on access file, it requires me to go ahead and re-register with a new password on the Office 365 account. So this might be a Gmail account, but here I am just registering in Microsoft with a Gmail account, and then I choose a brand new password for this. And once I click on that, then it basically gives me access, to my Office 365 group, just like any other user. But of course, there are certain limitations to it. I cannot access. I will be getting all the emails going back and forth within my account itself, within my Gmail account, but I might not be able to look into conversations. I might not be able to, do certain things like delete or access certain files. But other than that, I can actually access pretty much every single thing within the group, like files and information and OneNote and all of that. So let's go ahead and talk about naming conventions. Now, right when I created this account here, I did not choose AQL, the prefix AQL over here. The reason being that, but it still did create that. The reason being that I actually have a certain configuration set within my, which is set right within my Active Directory. And only admins can do this. And when I do this, the users can, any group which is created, it needs to have a certain prefix. And this is how that looks like. So the group naming convention within my Office 365, Azure settings, I can create a current policy, which is AQL_departments. And this is right here. The text is basically AQL, but then the attributes I can select as departments. So if the user who's creating the group has got a department associated with it, then there's going to be the department selected. If there's none, it's not. In my case, I don't think I actually had any. That's the reason it did not show me a department. If the user that I was logged in as actually had the attribute of IT as a department, then the group would also have the department in there. And another text, which is an underscore, and then down at the bottom, you can see that AQL_departments_group names. And right over here for the suffix, please apply the following sequence, and I can actually apply a suffix as well, down underneath there. Now, there's also an Office 365 group mobile app, and this expires on May the 1st. I know there are so many different Office 365 apps. This is one of those, and this actually expires on May the 1st, 2018. I think that this was just overwhelming. You can download the Office 365 app, and you can actually see when you download the Office 365 app, you can make use of groups in there, and I think that was more than enough. But then Microsoft had this Office 365 group mobile app. I don't think that's actually required. Now let's talk about disabling group creation access. This actually requires PowerShell. I'm not going to go in PowerShell, but here's a sample of the PowerShell. I'm going to upload this on my website as well. You can go ahead and download that. So this PowerShell lets you create a very controlled mechanism for creating groups. So right now, by default, as you have seen, anybody can go ahead and create groups. But if I want to have a controlled mechanism, then I can go ahead and create a security group. And this is where I'm creating a security group, and this is happening in Azure Active Directory. I can create a security group, and this is the name of the security group. And what I'm saying is that only the users who are part of the security group, only they can go ahead and create groups. Nobody else can. So if I go back, and then I can show that to you. If I go back, and this is a different account, where should I have this one right here? So this is actually a different tenant. I did not run PowerShell in my main tenant, but if I actually had a tenant, this is actually the demo tenant, and over here I'm logged in as a Submit demo user. Again, this is a different tenant, but over here when I go in groups in Outlook, I cannot create new groups. This is a very controlled mechanism for creating groups. So once that PowerShell script is run, it's pretty controlled. You probably might have to approach the right people for creating groups. And this is, for PowerShell guys, this is how it appears like behind the scenes. It actually says enable group creation is set to false. And then the group creation allowed group ID is basically this right here. So which is behind the scenes ID of the security group that I created. Group 365, Office 365 group classification. So when I was creating a group, I have seen that there's a certain classification. And Microsoft, I would recommend having this classification. The reason being that you end up having so many different sites. And if you ever want to categorize what kind of site, what is the security level of these sites? Are these, high security level? Are these low security level? Or are these just regular security, low security levels? So there's a way that you can actually go ahead and configure the security classification. This is going to require PowerShell, but you end up creating security level which looks just like the one that we saw when I was creating the Office 365 group. So if I go back to group membership right here, edit group, then I can actually see the classification high, medium, and low. And if I click on the classification example over here, then it's going to show me the classification details over here. Then it actually shows me what high is. Only specific users can access. Medium, all internal users can access. Low, no restrictions. So this is a way that I can actually make some sense out of all these different groups. I can make sure that all groups with high classification are, private. No external users in there. Anything with medium, they can be private. They can be, or actually they have to be private. And as far as external users are concerned, it could be the owner's judgment. When it comes down to low, it could be, completely dependent on the user to make it public or private. And again, the owner's judgment on actually creating, adding external users or not. So this is a sample. I had to use PowerShell to enable this. Office 365 group expiration. This is another feature of Office 365, which again is one of the best practices, and I'm going to show you a list of the best practices that I recommend after a couple of slides. But over here, you're going to see that these are the list of best practices, and in this, I can actually go ahead and specify, automate the group expiration. I can go ahead, and this is again from Azure Active Directory settings, but I can say that, hey, after 31 days, expire this group, or all the groups, and if any of these users are orphan groups, which pretty much means that the owner has left the company or owner has just left the group and there are no owners in there, then it's going to send an email to an alternate email address, which is this. If not, before the expiration, it sends out an email, and this is how the email looks like. it's going to have this box. I'm sorry if this image is not that clear, but it's going to have a group expiration in here, and users can renew the group or users could go to the group. So these are for the owners. They get this email, and owners get to renew the group, or they can also restore a group. So there's a setting that this is a soft delete, which means that these groups and all the data associated with that, maybe the team size, maybe everything else, it's actually going to be stored for 30 days, and after 30 days it's gone. But meanwhile, within 30 days, if the admin wants to go ahead and restore this group, then it's possible. Dynamic membership. This is one of my very favorite things in Office 365 groups. Dynamic membership. Instead of you adding all the users to every single group, you can actually specify certain queries within Azure Active Directory so that dynamically those users are added to the group. Like for example, if I just go ahead and create a group which is AQL IT departments. So anybody who's in the IT department and any new users, any new employees who join the IT department, if I want them to be automatically added to a certain group, and this group has access to all the different resources that IT is going to need, then I can actually go ahead and create a dynamic membership group, and I specify query over here, which basically says that the department of the user is equal to IT. So as soon as this is done, all those users, maybe a couple users, maybe a couple hundred users, all those users just get added automatically to the group. I just love this feature. It just automates a lot of things for you. Azure Active Directory licensing requirements. So I've been talking about Azure Active Directory a lot. There are a couple of different flavors of Azure Active Directory. If you have Office 365, it actually brings you free, and a lot of the Office 365 groups features are part of the free Azure Active Directory, which is anything that we have been dealing with so far, which is create, read, group activity report, soft delete and restore, hidden membership. All of these are part of the free plan, but some of the advanced features like dynamic group membership, self-service group membership, group creation membership, group naming convention, group expiration, usage deadlines, default classification, you gotta purchase the premium P1, P2 Azure Active Directory. So let's talk about managing. So now that we talk about some of these features, so these features are crucial in managing Office 365 groups, and I recommend these 5 different features for managing Office 365 groups. Group reporting, admins can view group usage. So this is only for the group admins though, but control versus open, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. Set up security groups for control group creation. If you don't like the open way of creating groups, which is any users can end up creating groups, then you can actually go ahead and using the PowerShell, as I had just mentioned, you can go ahead and set up a control model for actually creating these groups. Naming policy. Create custom naming policy. I think that this is very mandatory. You got to know who created that, which department created that. So it's very important that you have a good naming policy for group creation. Expiration policy. Again, expiration policy is one of those very important things. Your groups got expired. Your hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of groups that you have down the line, they got expired, and there's got to be these owners who need to renew them if they think that there's value behind the scenes. If not, a lot of times, and we have seen this in the past with SharePoint groups, or I'm sorry, the SharePoint team sites in the past, that there are these hundreds and thousands of SharePoint team sites which are created and nobody's just using it. So you can actually put some sense over here by applying expiration policies so that if the owners don't approve it, then they get deleted, and which is again a soft delete and can be restored after 30 days. So this is the soft delete and restore. They can be deleted within 30. They can be restored within 30 days. Talk about best practices and governance. What does Microsoft recommend? Microsoft does not recommend a controlled approach for Office 365, but they recommend a loose control, which basically means that it's a good practice to actually have a certain way that users can still create it. Do not lock it down, because a lot of these services, Planner, OneNote, Teams, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft, team sites, a lot of these actually depend on Office 365 groups. So do not lock it down. Let your users go ahead and create it. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about in the next slide, what is the best way of creating them. Self-service versus controlled group creation, established naming conventions, group deletion policy, group expiration policy, classification of groups, policies for external users based on classification. So set up policies of external users based on classification. Again, one of the things I got to talk about in a second. Configure alerts for abnormal behavior and security and compliance. And security and compliance in Office 365, which is pretty powerful, you can go ahead and set alerts on abnormal behavior, like humongous files being downloaded, an abnormal behavior of accessing the site. You can go ahead and set up alerts on that. And this is a very good governance mechanism. As soon as the admins get the alerts, they can actually go and start digging into what's really happening over here, and then put tighter matrix on my threat group. Set alternate email when creating them for orphan cases. Use PowerShell to generate, to generate reports. So what basically means is that you can actually have, so in lines with what I talk about classification, which is high, low, and medium, you can actually write down PowerShell scripts for better governance to make sure that any group which has a classification of high got to be private. If it's not the regular PowerShell scripts, they can just go ahead and change it to private. Does not have external access. If it's got external access, just go ahead and remove external access. So these PowerShell scripts, you can actually write down pretty strong PowerShell scripts, and this is primarily for admins. I wouldn't blame end users for not being able to write PowerShell scripts, but these are definitely for admins. So admins can go ahead and write these PowerShell scripts to actually, do a lot of things behind the scenes and make sure that these groups are safe and within governance limits. Best practices for external user access. User managed. Every user can add external users. So this is one approach. Just go ahead and have every user, add external users. Or what you could also do is that you could write down certain policies, but this is going to require Active Directory, where you go ahead and make sure that only users with a certain user profile, like, if they have a user profile like their Office 365 admins, or they can invite guests, only they can go ahead and do that. That's possible also. Or the domain manager, which is IT, can create a white list that's actually a white list of domains, and only users of that domain can be added. So which means that now IT is actually managing a whole list of, a whole list of domains, and only users from these domains can be added. So again, it requires PowerShell for doing that. And finally, IT manage, which is just approved by IT admin can approve and be added. So which means that only a certain specific IT people, this is the most hectic way IT is going to be, getting a lot of phone calls and emails for adding, guest access, which I don't see as practical in really huge organizations. So for disabling group creation, these are the three different models, kind of like in lines with what we talked about. Open, which is all users can create their own groups, as needed without needing to wait for or bother IT. This is the default behavior we have seen. IT-led, again, users request a group from IT, and IT creates them. Admins will restrict group creation to only IT. Controlled access, group creation restriction to specific people, teams, or services. Admin will restrict group creation to a set of people. So these three are the different models for, just creating groups in general. So in a control, which is kind of like the control mechanism, you can actually also write down a workflow, of a Microsoft Flow-driven workflow, for an approval process before these groups are being created, which is the user enters group details in SharePoint list. So it's a basic SharePoint list. Microsoft Flow fires up, and it sends a request approval for the manager. It requests manager approval for this group to be created. If the manager approves it, the Microsoft Flow can invoke some Azure functions and then create group plus owner behind the scenes. So this is a workflow to automate control group creation. For some of the clients at AQL, this is what we have already implemented. We have implemented. They didn't want to have an open way of creating groups, because they understand that users might just end up creating all these different groups that are not even being used. So we ended up creating a control mechanism and providing this workflow where, the manager needs to approve creation of this group before the group is really created. Finally, Office 365 groups reporting. You can actually see that that there's rock-solid reporting behind the scenes. You need to log into the admin center. When you do, you're going to see a whole bunch of reports over here, and I can actually see, what are on the group center, I can actually, I gotta select, by the way, I gotta select the Office 365 groups activity. When I do, I can actually select groups over here. These are in blue, the total groups. These are the active groups. It shows me a whole list of groups over here, which are the most active. It shows me the email received, mailboxes, total files, active files, Yammer messages. Actually, when it comes down to files, these are, of course, by default SharePoint files. So you can actually do a lot of tracking over here. There's activities, there's files, there's storage. You can actually track all of that as to what's happening within a certain group, which is the most active group, how many emails are being sent out, what is the file size being sent out, how many files are being sent out. So there's a lot of control and governance over here. You can keep a track of what's actually happening over here. Benefits of using these groups. Benefits for IT. It's self-service. Users can create it by themselves. Group identity and asset created in a single step. Centrally managed as a single object in an Azure Active Directory. Simplified permission and access structure. Guest access without complex configuration. Dynamic membership. Group activity reports. So there's a lot of benefits for IT. On the end user side, you just get to start immediately. You get to actually create messaging, shared calendar, team site, planner plan, automatically assign permissions, dynamically add users. So there's a lot of benefits for these end users. They are public by default, which enables users to discover and join new groups easily. Private groups provide the flexibility to control access to your group. Easy to manage independently. New members onboard quickly. And there's data classification. So there's a lot of benefits to actually using these groups. Group management features. These are some of the group management features. And we have seen that soft delete and restore, naming policy, file quotas. I can actually go ahead and specify file quotas. If I don't want more than a certain size of the site, then I can go ahead and do that. And that's the team site where all the files are being stored from the group. Expiration policies, ban words and profanity checking, group activity reports, assign group creation permission, add, remove external members, add members and admins, set as public, private, dynamic membership, classification, default classification. So a lot of these are very good group management features. Out of this, I tried classifying, which of these can be done by end users. So end users can do kind of like, stuff good enough for their operations, but might be basic enough, like creating groups, set as public, private, add members and admins, add and remove external members, delete groups. Admins can do everything else, delete and restore, naming policy, file quotas, expiration groups, preservation and deletion group, ban words and profanity checking, group activity reports, assign group creation permission, dynamic membership. So as we have seen, there's a lot that's going on with these groups, and groups are extremely powerful, and they are humongous. They actually cover so much that, it takes a lot to put everything together in one single, in 1 hour webinar. And there's a lot of different administration screens which are spread across, maybe, just by the users, by the end users, maybe by, from Exchange, maybe from the admin center, maybe from Azure Active Directory. So the administration screens of these groups are actually spread across. I'm going to go ahead and post all those screens together as one single blog post on my screen so that everybody can actually experience, what it takes to administer these Office 365 groups. So by the way, with all that being said, this is the webinars and the list of webinars. I'm going to have some of these webinars down the line, and I'll try keeping everybody posted. These are the SharePoint conferences. We're actually, as I said, we are actually going to be part of the Washington DC conference, March 26th to 23rd. If you happen to pass by, then definitely make sure that you actually stop by our booth. And so actually, I see a question over here. Can we automate anything in Office 365 groups for better management? Yes, as I said, and please ask me any questions that you have. I'm going to try answering as many questions as I can. So can we automate anything in Office 365 groups for better management? Yes, use PowerShell for expiration, as I said, for dynamically managing group members. So there's a lot that you can actually automate, but expiration is by far one of the most important things. Dynamically managing groups, you'll need PowerShell for that, but you can still do it. Another question, any security recommendations? Yeah, I mean, so So yes, create them in their own domain, which means that now Office 365 can be created in their own multi-domain. So if you don't need external access, admins can disable the external access. External access can be disabled. If you don't need that, that might be a good thing. And then, just expire the groups if they're not required. This way, if there's any security threat, the groups expire, and it's pretty well managed. So I guess, guys, that's pretty much it for today. If you have any more questions, please ask me any questions. Okay. If I delete an Office 365 group, will it clean up after itself? So the thing is that, Office 365 group I think that it does a pretty good job of actually cleaning up. So if Office 365 group is created, or if you end up creating the team side, behind the scenes, what's going to happen is that it actually creates everything associated with the group itself. Maybe Office 365 group, maybe the team side, maybe the planner side, maybe the OneNote, maybe the team chat. So everything is actually created. So Office 365 group does a pretty good job of actually doing a cleanup after it's done. And this is the soft delete, which means that they are still there for 30 days, and after 30 days, they're permanently deleted. Yes, it's a pretty good feature. It's a pretty good feature, and I love that. Is there a way? Okay, so another question: is there a way that you can give specific permissions to specific parts of the Office 365 scheme? So I think what you're trying to ask is that, can you give very specific permissions to users and different SKUs? No, that's not possible. So you have this group, all the users are added to this group. So any permissions that this Office 365 group gets within any of these Office 365 SKUs is pretty much what there is. I have not seen any roadmap from Microsoft for having granular permissions to the members of the Office 365 groups. So it's pretty much everybody has got the same kind of membership. Another question: is there a way to block individual guest users? I have not come across anything. I have not seen anything. Individual guest users cannot be blocked, but if there's something that comes out down the line, then it could be very well possible. So I think, guys, I just got one more minute. Thank you so much for attending my session. It takes a lot to put this session together. If you have any kind of questions, please shoot me an email. If they're quick, I'll try my best answering them. If it actually takes more than 5 minutes to answer them, I probably might not be able to get back to you. And finally, AQL Technologies. If there's any kind of services that you're looking for on this platform, we would be more than welcome to work with you. We have like 1 hour of free consultation. If you're looking for a 1 hour of free consultation, then let us know. A lot of our clients are looking for guidance on Office 365, and some of these governance and best practices that I just mentioned to you, they are derivative of our practical implementation that we have done. So thank you so much, guys, for attending my webinar. And I would love to see you guys in my next webinar. Thank you again. Have a very nice day. Bye.